everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Developer Insights. I'm Dave Valentine. If you didn't check out last week's show, please do with Ricard Otterson. And especially, please take a quick look at his blog. He's put up some really interesting things on abstraction of processes and programs. I'm joined this time by Phethean of Matika, and we'll be talking all things data integration, data transformation, and developer journey to CEO. Hopefully, it's going to be an interesting listen for you all. Okay, then. So, thanks very much for joining us today, Aaron. Very good to meet you, and very good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, no worries. All right, so let's jump on straight into it then without much ado. Developer to CEO. What's that journey been like for you? Where did you start really sort of developing? When did you become a CTO, a CEO rather? And when did you start morphing from one to another? Where would you consider that point to be?
You know, probably your faux pas of saying CTO is something that you get, and I have to throw that baggage off. So that's probably worth keeping in mind in the journey to CEO. So if you wind all the way back, I probably always had an entrepreneurial bent to what I was doing, and I love technology. And the journey through technology to then recognizing that you can do more outside of the one thing you're working on. It's a pretty natural progression every step of the way, I think. But the biggest leap is just casting off the technology, you're a technologist label, and you can't do anything else. And actually, like everything, you can't to begin with. You can't do marketing yet. You can't do sales yet. You just can't do these things yet. So, you probably have to take the time to start at a lower level in those disciplines, and then they all catch up, and then you're much more complete and well-rounded enough to do the whole thing. And yeah, but getting rid of the technology or a technology person, I think is the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, so actually really actively got to want to do it and get your hands away from the keyboard on a daily basis, which I think a lot of technical people are quite loath to do. Now, whether that's from a safety point of view, a knowledge point of view, or an imposter syndrome point of view.
Yeah, so I think personally, at the moment, like being CEO, the easiest thing in the world to do is to pick up the keyboard and write some code. That is like an escape route to feeling productive, and it is not productive. It's absolutely not the thing you should be spending your time on. And and a lot of tech founders, to starting with company, and they'd all say the same thing. They know that's not making a difference, but boy, God, it's just so easy. And this is what's so perverse. Someone is starting a company who's not a technologist. They think all that technical stuff is hard. And it's a very afraid that it's definitely a safe space for a technology person.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting question, and I obviously don't know the answer. So, what sort of partnerships have you had to foster to enable you to get along this route? You said about creating an entrepreneurial spirit, but how do you do that inside a big company? I mean, big companies are renowned for their stickiness and not wanting any change and not wanting anything to happen. How do you keep entrepreneurial inside a company which doesn't want to move fast?
I think the product route, because as opposed to if you stay in IT or if you stay leading technology teams, as opposed to when you think about the product touches customers, it touches pre-sales, it touches sales, it touches marketing. So that product management, product route definitely helps to get you out of just pure technology. And then if you build those relationships and you spend the time trying to understand what they need, and actually that includes legal, finance, and a really fantastic experience of all those disciplines in a big company. And I can remember lots of legal debates about creating contracts that were excruciating at the time, but so valuable now. They really appreciate what each part of the contract means. So if you're given that opportunity in a big company, it's free training. It's free telling you what on earth a legal contract means and what structures involved. Yeah.
So you'd be a big advocate of sitting in any room at any point and just listening to people and seeing how they do their jobs and their concerns around that?
Yeah, and they're far from finding you frustrated, go and then organize another meeting afterwards, and can really help you with that and give you what you need there. And if you find yourself in that position to interface with someone who a discipline that you're not used to, well, that's a great thing to try and go after and come. And that you'll probably get promoted and you'll do really well and you'll find lots of people who like you. There's just no negatives to it. Yeah, but technology people do tend to find it frustrating. What do you mean? Can't you just go away and do it? Well, why do you want? Why can't you this outcome? They're join the two things together and be that interface.
Yeah, and I think that probably touches on the previous conversation we had on people and tech, which is being that communication layer between products and tech and being able to try and translate what's needed at the tech layer into what the business needs to do and vice versa.
Yeah, and that could be in the form of presenting. It could be you start out with presenting to small groups that are not really for the purpose of winning new customers, or you might be speaking to customers, you're going to have it as a presentation. You're really just honing messages the whole time. And I think in that conversation we had about people and technology, and a lot of that centered around the kind of internal concerns of how operationally things need to happen in technology. And there's a lot more to growing outside of a technology domain. And that's probably a touchy area.
Well, I think it neatly segues into the next question then. On Developer Insights and the rest of the tech-led culture family of pods, we're all talking about humanising and how we can bring the human element back into sort of like everyone's daily roles and appreciate people for being people. Tell me about Aaron the person, what you like. What would you say about yourself and your and family life? How do you mix a family life with a technological life? And again, like I'd imagine, like most tech people, you spent most of your younger career 15 hours or so at a keyboard bashing away and then 3 hours at night.
It's that's a fascinating thing to just think about. So I guess my first thought was, what's the outside perception? So I've had the experience in the past where people say, your bio is actually really interesting. So a lot of riding mountain bikes, like playing rugby at the moment, so I'm playing in the park, I'm playing gym, I'm going climbing, love things like camping, looking outdoors, I play lots of different sports, and there's actually just doing interesting things is quite an important part of that what is it like to be a technology person. And I don't think some strange things perhaps in technology. I don't mind playing games. I'm not really a gamer. That seems really popular, I think, in the industry, and that's okay. Yes, that's pretty cool. I don't even really tend to go near the computer outside of doing some work. But then I think, okay, then the other perspective you mentioned is, well, the 15-hour days, really a long time. I definitely do a lot of that. I definitely do a lot of, what I'm working on, I spend an awful lot of time at work, and I go home and spend some more time on it, and you will definitely get totally immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm not really into the latest phones or loads of different apps. I'm not really, in those respects, I'm not really spending a load of time on technology for just the technology's
sake. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting way, I think, to put it, really, that I think this tech of our generation, and maybe on the generation before yourself, I won't flatter myself there, have been so involved in that technology in the past, but have now not actually keeping up with those latest trends. And as the rate of acceleration gets faster and faster, and the rate of change within inside, I think the classic example, there was mobile phones.
Mm.
I don't know anyone who uses 100, even approaching 30% of the functionality within their phone, how it can even be used.
Yeah, I think a lot of people getting into assistants, so not those kind of Lexus of the world, but like going on their way to buy even fancier and more well-connected assistants, and but that's a whole domain on that. Actually, maybe that'll become commonplace, and I'm nowhere near that a minute. That's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, thinking back to your time as a developer earlier on, so sort of what burning fires did you see as a developer now? And back on the other side, looking back on those times, what did you really care about then, which you look back on and gone, that really wasn't productive time well spent? And then sort of like vice versa.
I think the most recognizable things when I'm speaking to someone who I can see exhibiting many of the traits that I had, and the kind of code perfection idea, agonizing about how things are structured, but totally forgetting that systems are fundamentally inputs and outputs, and what goes on in the middle probably doesn't matter that much. I mean, I'm definitely heavy on the testing now because then I can improve the middle. Whereas early in my career, tests not even really a thing. And I still see people habitually not writing tests now.
Yeah.
And I think, well, do you not see the benefit? Like, do you not see how then you can confirm your outputs? And I often talk about it as not going backwards. The to and fro, undoing a chain that you didn't lock in the previous one. That's the sort of thing that I find currently quite frustrating. Like, it's just going backwards and forwards, waste time, and that's probably an experience that is that you can see how problems will come up again. You've seen your own code or your own issues come up again that you've introduced. You're like, I wish I had been a test for that at the time. You've had that experience often and often.
I don't. Yeah, no one regrets writing a test. I don't think.
No, there's no.
Yeah, but maybe that's an interesting question as well. And I think on developer insights and the ad hoc conversations we've had with other people, especially around the testing and TDD, but more from the application side of things. So, with the application side of things, we get a C# class and you can test that. You got Java class, you can test that. And then you can make sure about the interfaces and you can get the dependency injections and blah, 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 all the way down. But how does that tie into sort of like the data world? And, especially when we're moving such vast amounts of data, how can we test those data pipelines?
Yeah.
What's the analogy for doing that?
So there's certainly tons of layers of testing, just like there is in say in regular software engineering. I think one of the kind of epiphany learns for anyone data led and try to create analytics is that actually it's much more acceptable to be present but know how much is present than it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to understand how essentially how far out it is and what is the tolerance of this data. So there's all I've sort of very in recent times I think a good movement towards reporting on data quality and reporting around data itself, which is actually fundamentally testing. But you're trying to show where the gaps are, understand the gaps. Is this mission critical, this problem, or is it kind of okay? It's the reports that it affects. Kind of only or once a month things, and looking at it today is not super high priority. Other ones, okay, this is critical today, so we need to look at it. So sort of understanding the nature of the problem is getting better and better in and around these.
Yeah, and I think most forms of software in any way, shape, or form is we get some input and get some output. The black box in the middle, who cares? Who cares how that operates, where that operates, when that operates, as long as it does, and does so in a reliable way.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that I think you see probably more in the world of data is, and I think it feels a little bit like it's following the software engineering path. As we talking about data ops, as disciplines are quite similar to DevOps. And I think that's trying to get away from people keeping things running to systems keeping things running and automating the transformation and appreciating when and where that's necessary. So it looks like in a lot of data operations, like software engineering did 10 or 20 years ago, because it's, they just don't have a kind of robust way to keep things moving forward and also roll things back if they're not right. Whereas that's becoming much, much more commonplace, and the technologies are there. The adoption through teams is not necessarily there. Back to the beating problems, changing habits quite hard.
Yeah, and I think that leads me back into maybe a little bit of a left field thought I had when we was on our previous conversation, and we was talking about ownership of systems. And I think one of the great things about cloud technology is treating things as cattle and not pets, i.e., we don't have owners for these things. When these things go wrong, we can shoot them, spin up something else. And maybe at some point soon, that ownership needs to be a little bit more devolved. I don't know.
So I think one of the things in data that I think that owners did assign to it, and maybe people forget what systems are there for. Actually, fundamentally, every operational system is capturing data. Almost no one in those operational systems thinks about the data as an output. Well, they might think about their operational report, like how many things are in progress. So they don't necessarily think about the trends that leads to, or the upstream systems that cause the orders or whether they are to riot in the first place, and how those two join together. Because they'll merely add fields or remove fields or change the data capture, which fundamentally affects the kind of reporting that you can do. So I think when they assign an owner, what they're really hoping to do is assign someone who cares about the data exhaust from the system, who cares about that as a piece of data or data product. And who is it? Who can we go to that is responsible for adding fields or removing fields or making sure we're capturing the right things? And that blends into business analysis and someone thinks end to end. But that's I see the data owner role maturing.
Okay, cool. So, AI is obviously a big thing now, and I don't think there's anyone who's not using ChatGPT engines on a day-to-day basis. But is it really coming for us now? What does a developer need to do to future-proof themselves against making themselves redundant to an AI engine? Or is it even going to be happening?
So I've certainly played with the generative code. So that's our first thought of how it affects the developer. And it tends to be the first result is pretty poor. And then there's some extra input, which you only know through experience what the extra input needs to be. You get a decent piece of code. So it really simple thing. If you're data AI and handling the errors is a pretty big part of the code. Actually writing the connection is true. But dealing with problems is pretty hard. So you tend to have to prod further and further before you get anything like what you need. So it doesn't yet understand, doesn't yet understand the error scenarios. And that's a time thing, or mainly there's this resource oriented generation. You're adding enough context to generate the right thing. So I think you'll find catalogs of inputs that are there to train certain scenarios. Actually, they are all there inputs and in design practices and design patterns, and they just need to be put in such a way that they're the right inputs for the scenario you're dealing with. And then it's going to be really useful. But I don't see And integration code, okay, that will probably be automated when that's actually a pretty good opportunity. But I don't see engineers being able to work on there. Actually, if you look at what they spend most of their time doing, it's managing change. It's not really writing a piece of code. And so you're managing change of systems, you're managing change to one works with another. So all of those things are not automated away, and you can't know the system before and after yet. You don't have enough data to generate for that. So yeah, their jobs are safe for a long time.
No, that's good news anyway. And I genuinely hope your side of the coin is right, and AI isn't coming for us all.
I suppose where I'm on the part of the AI battle, if you like, is we're generating data of high enough quality to be good input for AI, and that's going to become more and more part of what we are doing as business intelligence or business analysis. Is that tagging data and producing data that is good enough to be used? That's going to become the primary differentiator between one approach or another, or one company or another. And we will produce higher and higher quality data and more complete data sets. We'll have more and more sensors all over the place. And we'll enable more and more use cases. So we're definitely, we're an accelerator to all of this. And I'm not worried to see how you still need to put sensors in place. You still need to techniques in place. You still need to deliver high quality data. And maybe there will be a role shift in more people into our function, growing industry. But yeah, I don't see people all out of a job. That's the law.
Good to know. Good to know. So, where do your data projects start, and how are the data projects you get involved with different to other sorts of IT projects? When you get a customer come to you, what's their general sorts of problems?
Yeah, so I tend to think about the company first. So a company of two people, largely doesn't need a data solution for their activities, because they just look over at the other desk and they ask a question. You're going to see everything. And that carries on for quite a while. So 50, 100 people, you can probably still see everything that's going on. There's a factory floor, or you can imagine what that looks like to just see every part of the operation.
Mm-hmm.
100 people or so, man, you are starting to get to the limit. And we're not talking about data collection industry type companies. They are obviously dealing with more people. On over 100 people you can see in your company, filling out an order and putting it into a package.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. Then when you get big enough, you can't see any. You can't understand where the optimizations might be. You've got too many people doing a similar role. They don't even talk to each other. And so you start to need data, and you start to spot that you need data. Probably in finance, pretty common. Marketing is pretty common. It's starting to deal with lots more people you can individually keep a grasp of. Sales roles and something like conversations, you start to get them. It sort of the starts in the part of the company where the problem first manifests itself, and that kind of depends on the kind of company. And even thinking about here, I'm thinking, well, maybe I could be more clever about who I speak to, and I could always guess which part of the company the data initiative started in, so we know who to go and talk to. Because when we talk to a client, there's no. I can always start this. Like, is there data center in the universe in finance or marketing? Got no way to tell them. And then that, I suppose, leads to the types of systems that you're dealing with, types of questions that you're dealing with. You might find you're dealing with a company that has 3 major initiatives that have all popped up at similar timing and happen to be needed by different parts of the company. They're not really talking to each other. That's pretty common too. So it's like a lot of things in IT to react to what's going on.
Yeah, I say. So, So working on these projects and you've got a good team working together, what would be a difference between, say, the great data teams and the great traditional developer teams? And how do they differ?
I think there's so right at the start of similarities and come back to it into that. So when I was in software engineering form, I definitely saw that the experience of the end user massively influenced how good you were at the development, because either you had a much better concept of what the problem was, or you had a much better appreciation of what making a mistake might cause. If you're dealing with a response system for ambulances and you get to see someone who dies because the ambulance doesn't get there in time, you're going to put real care into that code, because there's no doubt it will have an effect on how you do. And similarly in data, if you can imagine what the business needs, if you speak to the people in the business, if you are much more connected with the question and the person, well, your analytics is going to be an awful lot better, because you'll start to perceive what data models you need, what data you need, what else is coming, not just what they're asked for in that moment. And yes, that's where I see them similar. I think where they're different is that you have to hang on to legacy even more in data, because there's a history of things that have changed. There's a history of data, and you don't want to or can't keep going back to rewrite history. So you're kind of dealing with this progression throughout time, whether you want to or not. Whereas in software, it tends to be quite sort of a one-off exercise. There's no great we're on a new version. Hey, one new version you're on Celebrate, whereas you're never really on the new version of data.
Yes, I think once that data has been persisted to disk, it generally cannot be re-persisted to disk in a different way unless there's a lot of lift and shift effort pushed into it.
Yeah, and then the effort, even in small projects, beyond the triveliest things, it is too hard to go back and change everything with that approach.
Yeah. And how about those situations where, you picked on a good example there, where a new version of the API gets upgraded, and then the data obviously gets enriched in a slightly different way. So now it's been changed from version 1 to version 2, and we've now got multiple attributes which have come back into it. And how do we apply blank attributes for those old bits of data previous to that data existing in inverted commas?
Yeah, I think that the techniques haven't changed a lot over time. You're fundamentally trying to sort out the facts from your dimensions of their kernel. And whether that's the terms that you like to use, post Kimball type era.
Oh yeah, I was going to say we're best going back to dimensions and facts.
Yeah, fundamentally, that's all that happens in the world. Things happen, and they've happened in spaces. And so when you look at an API change and it's changing an attribute about where it happened, well, you're trying to represent it in a way that the users really understood. It's annoying that the system changed, how it maybe captured it in higher fidelity or captured more information, and that required them to restructure things. And that is partly they never cared about the reporting, but they didn't really even think about how that was going to affect things downstream.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of shift left happening in data, and that's happened in DevOps, where in the best cases we're showing them the downstream impact at time it's changing through our tests and through our proofs of what was coming into the system. And then that maybe it's not good. It'll change those attributes or drop those attributes or split them out into 10 different things, because there's an impact there. Yeah, so that's, well, I think that answers the question at least. You're trying to draw them back into what's into the world.
Yeah. And I think maybe a slightly similar question really is, it's an overloaded term, but what does that mean to you, from the heart? And how do you go about applying that to sort of like what you see on a day-to-day basis? Because, again, with these big data projects, they tend to lend themselves to a very waterfally fashion in terms of we've written a transformation, now we're going to apply that to 12 terabytes of data.
Yeah, I haven't found anything about data necessitates a waterfall approach. Just as there wasn't anything in software engineering or product that required a waterfall approach. What's hard, I think, what is beneficial for Agile in general is that you can only do one thing at a time. And depending on what that thing is, it might mean several people are blocked and can only do one thing or waiting for one thing. So the biggest mishap in project management, I think, is this idea that you're efficient by being busier or by let's try and start another thing because we're blocked on something. And that just doesn't get more done. So that's the kind of, in general, a mistake in anything that's waterfall through to agile is a misconception about how you get more stuff done. You get more stuff done by making sure this path is a straight through path and not blocked. Fewer things is probably going to be faster, but still the same with data. Try to get back to the question all the time, like what is it that they want to know? There are some approaches in our way of working out as an industry now that you're not having to transform and change a whole bunch of data permanently, but you've got a much more flexible model of what makes sense now, and then the next question, what makes sense now. And I think it's rare that you're dealing with so much data that you can't rewrite a model as and when you need to. And certainly compute resources that are cheap enough and scalable enough that maybe when that decision is taken, bang, you run a whole bunch of compute for a moment, and then it's incrementally in a linear model. So you can definitely deal with that change in a much, much more agile way in the code as well as in just organizationally you can stay agile.
Well, I think that brings us neatly onto what's new and state of the art in data and data technology. What's the sexy things which you're looking at to punt off to help your customers with?
I think so. So it is AI. I think it's definitely in the AI space is new and exciting, and I suppose is why is it new and exciting is what's important. We have spent decades as a IT function trying to structure the work, and I think increasingly it's not necessary to structure the work. We can use a lot of the AI scoring and AI question and answer, and you can extract from what's going on in the world to create something of structure and of that. So that's a big optimization opportunity. Like you might not even need systems of capture for some of the current scenarios because they just can be captured from what's really happening. That's scanning emails, scanning calls, scanning video, scanning actual movement of people. They can all be perhaps sensed better without having the structure that was high. So I think that's pretty cool. And then the actual output, so the destined nature, the assistant to the work, kind of I look at the generative AI as it's a very much an interface, like the mouse was an interface, changed the way people interacted. People will be speaking to machines and asking questions and interacting in a much more fluid way. And that's hugely exciting. But not even really scratched the surface of what that might look like. Then there is this plenty of scope there for interfaces and ways things without a middle fundamentally changing just how you get to it changes.
Yeah, I quite like that analogy actually. The GPT interface is just the next iteration of the mouse. It's just your interface to that data, and how you use it is entirely up to you, and how you don't use it is entirely up to you.
Yeah, and it has access to a vast amount of data, so we'll get better and better at inputting the data that's relevant, and that is in very much the real world. That is our experience. Helps us choose what's relevant. But that's how these AI generative interface. It will be much, much more about choosing what's relevant, so you get the outcome you want. And there's some sort of topic-based ideas, sort of combination of humans suggesting what is relevant plus the generative stuff that is already making leaps and bounds. And probably that itself might be a thing that is more AI-led, like trying to figure out what is the relevance of the information I need for this problem, much more about the context of what you're thinking about at the time. So, there's tons and tons of exciting things in that place.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, cool. So what's the state of the nation for companies with aging technology? I surprised myself just by scanning the jobs ad the other day, and there was even something for like IBM non-stops. I don't know, I think that's about the first time I've heard that phrase for about 10 years. So there's old technology out there. Obviously, if it's working, it's working. You can't necessarily rip away things and change for change's sake. It's never good for anyone.
Yeah, I do like to spend some time thinking about the death of companies and industries and the kind of blockbuster moments. That is, and I do find that intriguing. And I think it comes back to tech debt. It turns into inefficiencies, which turns into a struggle to be profitable in your industry. So I think if you zoom out from the tech for a second, a lot of industries go through the cycle of innovation, competition, race to the bottom. And if you're an established company that's in some kind of race to the bottom, and you'll carry a whole load of tech debt without the efficiencies anymore, that's where it's going to hurt. And then you won't have the capacity to change all that tech, to modernize, to get more efficient before your competitors do. And that's where it really is. You've got to have a strategy, keep up, get ahead, for the sake of it, don't for the profitability. And I think if you look at, it really does depend on your company. In some industries, that won't matter. Like massive inefficiencies in a really innovative, high-demand industry won't matter because there'll be so much cash going in, so much ways to cover up the lack of inefficiencies. It's where it really won't matter. But there are a few of our like super angry companies who get that privilege to not worry about costs.
No. I think most companies are still very much got a tight handle on the purse strings for pretty much every sort of project.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. How do you see companies choosing their data technologies and strategies today?
Honestly, like a lot of areas of IT, totally random. People don't seem to consider the full picture, which includes the legacy. I'm a little bit frustrated as a data technologist and data company with the popularity of low code tools because I know the negatives of that. I know that often the company that's coming to us is sophisticated enough that they need to replace those tools to help a more advanced or sophisticated change promotion to speed things up to operate more efficiently. So they're okay, right place, right time. They're probably early on, but if you can't replace them, don't replace them. They sort of quickly become a problem. So there's a lot of just like the rest of that case. They clearly fed about what's the right technology from that and when do we expect it not to be the right technology anymore. And in absence of that, how people made technology decisions made it old-fashioned, what they know, what they feel comfortable with. Not necessarily bad things. If you're comfortable with it, and you're probably more efficient. But if there's a team to follow who are not comfortable with it, and then it's going to be the wrong choice. If it's some kind of legacy technology, it's going to be the wrong choice. These are hard things to consider with that experience of your isolation. But,
Yeah, and
it's still right.
yeah, and I think it's probably fair to say that every choice you can make is the wrong choice. But what's the least wrong choice?
Exactly. And like I suppose my last drive towards for big up our company too much here, but it's our approach is such that it's open technology. You can take it and run it without us. You could take it and put it on any other database technology. You really kind of strive to be without vendor lock. To be scalable, to be able to be used in the small and the large environment, which would create an engineering overhead while we're building, which is a cost to us. But now
Yes,
that we've done it, it's probably a great thing for everyone else. And I look at a product like I look at technology like Linux, and like I'm not running the new store machine here. This is kind of my choice. There is an overhead to running it and understanding. But the fact that it's so core to so many things, lots of different supported vendors, it's a kind of uber success story of how technology can become generally useful for everyone. And, it's got to win out at the end of the day. That they didn't look like they should have maturity yet. But I hope we're part of all that.
cool. Okay, so big one for the last question, as I think we're starting to run a little short of time. But what's the biggest opportunity in data for a company now? What things is really going to drive them towards success in the next few years?
So I think that the self-service nature has some pros and cons. So I definitely think there's still a huge benefit to people being able to look at what's going on, reason about better ways of doing it for themselves. I think ways for a data team or for us on the behalf, getting rid of the junk so that you're not looking at wrong conclusions. You're not looking at old things anymore. You're not sending it filter through past layers of complexity. So self-service definitely, but using has to make sure that the old stuff is chucked away. I think that sensing more as a company. There's so many inputs that you could be aware of to help decision making. And it's happening already. There are hundreds, thousands of sources involved in most companies. But are they accessing them? Are they making decisions based on them? Or are they really just looking this tiny
Yes.
little spot in the middle that they think they know about? So there's a big opportunity to include more data in what they do. There are monetization opportunities, which might be a profit center for some companies. That's probably a big area. Huge connectivity opportunities, like literally connected. There's still a lot of elements of manual company to company stuff that doesn't need to be there. So that's a big area. I think it's like I'm just keep going on with that. I thought also a little quite added, but I think are big opportunities.
Good. Okay, thanks. Okay, then, Aaron. I think that really brings us up to the end of our time together, which is a bit of a shame. It's been a very good conversation. It's been very good talking to you.
Thanks,
Have you got any
thanks for
passing words of wisdom you'd like to pass on to anyone in any form, in any role?
I mean, I think it's I want to maybe other back to the development kids. I don't hope they would be a professional sport. I really think that's a bad career choice, given the chance of being successful is so low. And it might be a great experience, so I'll let them go for it to some extent. Technology, data, software, absolutely excellent choice as far as doing something meaningful, being involved in something cutting edge. If you're early in your career, carry on, get more and more involved in the technology. It's a good space to be in.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, then, Alan. It's been a delight. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank
Thanks, then.
you.
Bye. Bye-bye.